not only between democracy and autocracy. This is very much also about impunity versus accountability. Our choice is clear. Allied armed forces will do everything they can to make sure that the rules-based international order and the democratic values we uphold remain firmly in place. We strive to protect a system in which those in power are held accountable for their actions. And that means that our job is twofold. We need to keep supporting Ukraine and at the same time strengthen our own deterrence and defense. At our sessions today, the Allied Chiefs of Defence discussed how we can increase the executability of the new defence plans that were approved in Vilnius last year. This ensures that we are ready to face current as well as future threats. What helps us is that the groundbreaking work for integrating and interlinking NATO and national defence plans has already been done. Now, we must actively work to make sure we can execute these plans with a minimum amount of risk. NATO is stronger and readier than it has ever been, but we want and need to do more in order to deter and defend any potential threat. And with that, I would like to give the floor to the Supreme Allied Commander, Europe, General Cavoli. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Admiral Bauer. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to have the opportunity to speak to you after today's very productive CHOD session. So, as Admiral Bauer pointed out, at the NATO summit in Vilnius last July, Allied heads of state and government approved our regional plans. And this gave Allied command operations, the command that I command, the necessary framework to move forward with modernizing our collective defense system. And since then, we've made very great strides in ensuring our plans are executable. It's clear that the plans provide everything our alliance needs to defend every inch of NATO territory, and we are rigorously testing those plans at every opportunity and refining them as we go forward. This past January, for example, we began Exercise Steadfast Defender, which is the largest NATO exercise since the end of the Cold War. It's the first live exercise to test our family of plans in an Article 5 scenario. This is a very big advance. Over the past 3.5 months, more than 90,000 personnel from all 32 allies have been training shoulder to shoulder towards collective defense. We've rehearsed our ability rapidly to generate combat power, and we've verified our formation's interoperability at scale. So, of course, a major element of modernizing our collective defense system is ensuring that we can operate at that scale, large scale, to synchronize multi-domain operations across the theater. So we're rebuilding our structures, our mechanisms, our procedures throughout Allied command operations. We've recreated SHAPE as a strategic warfighting headquarters, and we've streamlined how nations offer forces to NATO, and we are adapting our joint force commands for their new task at hand. We've done all this very rapidly. The pace of modernization throughout the alliance right now is astounding, be it in structure, procedure, or process. We still have much to do, of course, but allies have responded with a sense of urgency. We are more committed now than ever, and now that we've refocused on deterrence and collective defense, it's clear that NATO stands united, strong, and ready for any challenge. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
We'll start here at the front. You can follow the blue sweater.
Dmitry Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine, thank you for your floor. Admiral, today Mr. Putin in China stated that they are call for some kind of negotiations. After they've been briefed by the Ukrainian side today, have you seen some kind of dramatic changes on the front line which could push Ukraine to such kind of negotiations with Russians? And to General Cavoli, if I may, you know, we now talking a lot about the Kharkiv advance of Russian troops. From your point of view and from your assessment, do Russians have enough troops and capacity for such kind of strategic advance on that direction, or that such kind of psychological operation to push both NATO allies and Ukraine before the peace talks in Geneva? Thanks.
No, the Russians don't have the numbers necessary to do a strategic breakthrough. We don't believe. More to the point, they don't have the skill and the capability to do it, to operate at the scale necessary to exploit any breakthrough to strategic advantage. They do have the ability to make local advances, and they have done some of that. They've also made some local losses. So, I'm in very close contact with our Ukrainian colleagues, and I'm confident that they will hold the line.
And as a result of that, basically the situation is not changed to the point where the Ukraine authorities are willing to sit down and start negotiate. I think the Ukrainian armed forces are fighting to regain the land that is theirs, and that is difficult. A lot needs to be done to achieve that, and it will not be easy. But it's not easy for the Russians to actually get back what the Ukrainian armed forces took from them, because the Ukrainian forces have regained 50% of the territory that Russia took in the beginning of the war. So they're now chipping away on that, the Russian forces, but it's not strategic advances, it's not strategic successes. So for the moment, the meeting between Putin and Xi is not the reason why things have changed in Ukraine.
We'll go to Reuters next. Oh.
Andrew Gray from Reuters. Question to both of you. Did you hear any commitments around the table today to give Ukraine additional assistance, particularly when it comes to air defence? That's something that the Ukrainians have been asking for weeks, if not months now. You have both said, or certainly you have said, Admiral Bauer, and Secretary General has also said, that if it's a choice between NATO guidelines and helping Ukraine, they should help Ukraine. But yet, some of the people around that table don't seem to be making that choice. So do you see any change in that?
There is a very prominent example, and that's Germany. They are going to give a third Patriot system to Ukraine, which is extremely important for the air defense of Ukraine. There is a lot of things happening at this moment. I'm not going to talk in detail on what was discussed, but I'm convinced that we will see in the near future some serious improvements in the ammunition that Ukraine will receive. There is a lot of discussion ongoing on also, let's say, creative solutions in terms that nations try now to work together to find a complete system. So if one has the sensor and another one has the shooter and the third one has the ammunition, that together they make something, they come up with a solution for Ukraine. It is important, though, that, and that is something that is discussed regularly in the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, is that nations not only promise to deliver certain things, but that they also announce for Ukraine at what time, within how much time they actually are going to be able to deliver it. So it's not just the promise, but it is also, in the end, of course, the ammunition and the systems that the Ukrainians need. So I think that is something that has to improve. There was a delay for a lot of reasons that we know, but I think we see now that there's practical help on its way to Ukraine. And I heard a number of chiefs of defense talk about deliveries within days or a week, things like that. So I think the Ukrainians, not only we, but the Ukrainians will see improvements in the deliveries.
It's probably also worth pointing out that with regard to the meeting today, that was a meeting of NATO chiefs of defense, and NATO is not the exclusive or exhaustive list of donors to Ukraine. So there are plenty of other countries out there that are working hard toward the ends you described, especially about ground-based air defense.
Bloomberg.
Natalia Drozdiak from Bloomberg. I wanted to come back to the question on the battlefield in Ukraine, if I may. Just to elaborate a bit, what do you assess as Russia's objective with their latest push in the northeast? I mean, can this also be viewed as the start of the expected Russian summer offensive, or do you expect another bigger push at some point in the coming weeks? Thanks.
Sure. Well, you never know for sure what an adversary is going to do or what they intend to do. Clearly, they're attacking southward toward Kharkiv. Clearly, they intend to take back some of the territory that they lost last year in Ukraine's spectacular rout of their forces. The exact sequence and how they're going to do that may not be entirely clear yet, and it's best to leave things like that to our Ukrainian colleagues to puzzle out and probably not share how much they know about the other side's intentions. Is this the summer offensive? One can never be sure. What we don't see is large numbers of reserves being generated someplace. There is a standard mobilization that is a semi-annual draft call-up going on right now in Russia, but that is largely unrelated to the conflict so far.
Channel 24.
Thank you, Sofia Nazarenko, Channel 24. Currently, the Russian army is launching an offensive in the Kharkiv region, and according to the information available in Ukrainian public space, the offensive has been stopped. Do you share this information and views, and what could NATO do in terms of supplying Ukrainian army to avoid such situation in the future? Thank you.
Yeah, whether an offensive is stopped or not, takes a little bit of time to figure out, right? I mean, the offensive goes, stops, goes. So I'm not familiar with what exactly reports you're talking about from the Ukrainian media, ma'am. But in war, you never count things out until you're sure. What equipment do the Ukrainians need? What could help? Exactly what they're getting right now. They're being shipped vast amounts of ammunition, vast amounts of short-range air defense systems, and significant amounts of armored vehicles right now.
And I think it's important to understand and to explain. It's whatever we do not necessarily will prevent the Russians to do something. So it's not that we can prevent actions of the Russians. What we can do is to make sure that the Ukrainian armed forces are prepared to the maximum and are having the right equipment and the right ammunition to counter any offensive of the Russians. The things we do and how we help the Ukrainians is not necessarily stopping the Russians. In terms of deterrence, it's past that, because the war has started and the war is now, as I said, in the 813th day. So you cannot deter anything. The Russians will continue because they haven't achieved any of their strategic goals. That's why they continue. And that's why Ukraine has to continue, apart from the fact that they want the territory back that was taken from them. So,
Okay, Wall Street Journal.
Thank you. Dan Michaels with the Wall Street Journal. I'm curious what within NATO you're learning about Russia's ability to learn from its early mistakes and disorganization. Well, we hear what you're saying today, that they don't appear to have the strategic capability to make a breakthrough in a big way. They do seem to have reorganized a bit. So, as an organization that spends a lot of time observing the Russian military, what sorts of things are you learning? Thank you.
Yeah, clearly from the initial setbacks, Russia, like any army, sat back, figured out what problems they had and attempted to correct them. In some cases, Dan, they've successfully corrected things. In some cases, they've made improvements. In some, they've been unable to. And it's the task of the Ukrainian armed forces to find those areas that haven't been improved and exploit them, and to defend against those things that have been improved. But the Russian military has proven itself to be an organization that is prepared and able to correct its mistakes and to move forward. forward and has demonstrated a certain amount of resilience in that regard. However, you know, war is a competitive venture, and what you do is only important relative to what the other side has done. The Ukrainians' capacity for innovation, for adaptation, for creation of new techniques on the fly is truly unmatched. And I think we are all learning a lot from watching the Ukrainian adaptations to this battlefield.
I think if you look at what happens, you see some improvements. For example, the use of EW was basically non-existent in the beginning, and you now see there's more brought to bear. And we were surprised, actually, that it wasn't used earlier. Logistics is probably a little bit better than in the earlier part of the war because they didn't think about it, because they thought it was a 3-day war. So those are sort of logical things. Industrial capacity is a change that we see, where they are actually moving forward faster than we in Europe and in North America. So I think there is a number of things that they have improved, but there's a number of things that they haven't improved in terms of, if you look at the quality of the troops, they have a big problem still in making sure that the new troops are trained to a level that is actually better than the troops that were originally available. So they have now more troops, but the quality of the troops is lower than the troops they started the conflict with. And that has to do that a lot of the officers that were killed in the beginning of the war are now not available, of course, to train the younger troops. So I think that is one of the problems that is haunting them, and that they haven't solved that one. And the other one is simple equipment for the forces is not ideal, is not good, is not better than the equipment they started off with. So there's a number of things that is serious problems for the Russian forces, and a number of things they have improved on.
Okay, final question over there.
Vitaly Sizov, Freedom TV channel. Did you discuss the proposition of General Secretary to launch long-term financial support for Ukraine? He said about $100 billion or euro in 5 years. What do you think about this idea, and do you have enough resources to provide such long-term support? Thank you.
As you hopefully understand, that's not a military question. That is a political question to be answered by the governments within the alliance, whether they want to make sure that there is $100 billion or whatever the number is available in the longer term for Ukraine. So no, that is not being discussed, because that is not something the Chiefs of Defence of the alliance can solve. However, it is an understandable thing to look at the longer-term support of Ukraine, and that is militarily, in terms of capabilities, ammunition, training. That is something we have been talking about in terms of how we can contribute to that. And then, of course, the other element is the longer-term financial support. So it's something that was mentioned, but it is not a discussion point for the Chiefs of Defence.
Okay, thank you all very much for being with us, and have a good evening.